Good job.
Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. You know, I love my Fridays. They're my Friday, and it's a chance to just kind of wind down from the week, suit up for the weekends. And leading into this weekend, you know, in the midst of summer here, I really wanted to do something a little bit fun and special and continue on my MomTime Muses series with well, I don't want to say old, but you're one of my oldest and dearest people in my life, and somebody who is a true mentor, muse, friend, client, business partner, and godfather of my child. So with that, I want to welcome and also test out to make sure that you can all hear and see.
Hi, Cyn. I hope you can hear me too. Can you hear me? Hi, how you doing?
Hi.
15 years ago, you walked into the Learning Annex in New York City while I was taking my first book tour about spiritual cinema, and we connected, and boy, it's been quite a ride ever since then, hasn't it?
It's been awesome, and a lot of peaks and valleys, stops and starts, cool new ventures. You and I are very connected entrepreneurial spirits who like to take things from scratch and see it evolve and make it happen and turn ideas into action. And right from the beginning, it was amazing for me. You really connected the dots where I had entertainment as a very spiritual medium, but you really connected the dots for me between spirituality and film, where I always held kind of apart, and you really put that together where they can be one thing. It is one genre. And when I met you all those years ago, you were doing your first book tour. Do you have a copy of your book that you can just showcase for people? The Force is with you.
Yeah, this is kind of what began the journey.
That began the journey, and what you were doing was planting seeds and bringing communities together around the genre of spiritual cinema. So how many people have book clubs, we were basically, and where I really just dove in with you, is helping to form spiritual cinema communities to talk and weed out the genre of films that were spiritual. And back then we had to do a lot of work to define spirituality versus religion. Do you think it's that part is as much work today?
I think so. Frankly, it is. I think, you know, there was a wonderful movie in the 50s called The Song of Bernadette, which was a very religious film. It had, however, one of the great ad lines of all time. For those who believe, no explanation is possible. For those who do not, no explanation is no. For those who believe, no explanation is necessary. For those who don't, no explanation is.
That is an awesome pearl. Oop. And Stephen.
Oh,
okay. There you are.
Yeah. Which also started the Spiritual Cinema Circle, which is still going today, in which people can actually get 4 films a month. We have, I think, really done a terrific job of being able to bring spiritual entertainment to people.
Yeah. And so just as far as timeline, we met back learning at days, building spiritual cinema communities. At the time, I was working at Uline Cinema in the Business and Legal Affairs Department. And you, Gay Hendricks, Katie Hendricks, Ariel Ford, basically approached and came up with this idea to do a DVD Club of the Month for spiritual films.
Yes.
And what's cool about it is at the time, it was disruptive in the entertainment industry as far as inserting another mode of distribution that wasn't really in the lineup. Back in the day, it was just you did theatrical, then you did your hotels, then you did pay TV, then you did free TV, and somewhere in there came video. And that was basically the only ways that people had access to entertainment. And now the industry has converted so much over the years to, one, you have Facebook, which makes gathering community so much easier. And we were doing this before you had Facebook and be able to create groups and all this kind of stuff. So we were a little bit before our time. We were trying to do it through emails. And then the second part of is now we have basically a consumer is in the driver's seat for driving entertainment and where you can watch it and when. And with the advent of the internet and YouTube and creating web series, basically everyone can be their own filmmaker. So how does that play into when you are working with filmmakers and having to guide them, which is what you do now? Primarily you still have the circle, but primarily you do mentorship and consult different filmmakers and projects. How does that feed into how you guide them?
Oh, it's a very different world today. I mean, the world that you were describing seems like it was like antediluvian, right? But that was only 14, 15 years ago. The whole idea of filmed entertainment has completely changed over the last 10 years. Are really struggling, primarily movie theaters. Movie theaters are really struggling. Theaters are struggling to be able to break even, let alone make a profit. There's a million reasons for that, which we don't have the time to go into. It's just best to say that the theatrical business is feeling very endangered. However, filmed entertainment has more outlets now for writers and directors and producers than ever before because of places like Netflix, which has completely changed filmed entertainment. Maybe not forever, because nothing is forever, but when you can sit down and binge watch a 12-episode series on Netflix, and when they have a $3 billion per year programming budget, you're getting incredible entertainment in your home that's never been on a movie theater and that isn't designed to go into a movie theater, and you're getting it for $10 a month. That's pretty extraordinary. So that has changed. Yeah. When I now am working with clients, we're talking about, look, very few films see the light of day in a movie theater. And for big-time movie directors now, that's great. Steven Spielberg can make whatever he wants. And, there's like 10, 12, 15 directors that can do that, and actors as well. And it's great when you have a big entertainment on screen, but it's almost impossible. Is Tom Cruise, unless you have some kind of big book or something like that. For those of us who like stories that involve people and character and hope and inspiration, that is really winding up being on your home television now. And it's wonderful because for creative people, when you're working with places like Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and places like that, you have a lot of creative freedom, HBO, Showtime. So it's an exciting time. And that's something that I really enjoy when I work with the clients that I'm working with. And I have a very mixed bag of people. I'm working with somebody now, we've been working for almost a year together on an 8-hour series for Netflix. He just finished writing 3 full episodes and a detailed outline for the other 5 episodes. And it's extraordinary. He used to be a New York police detective, and an extraordinary story that he has. And then I'm working with a woman who is from India, and she is going to be doing a film in India in Hindi that we developed in English, which is a wonderful film that's going to be financed out of India. So, I have a great variety of people that I work with, and if people want to know more about that, they can just go to theoldhollywood.com and look up the mentor program. So I think that's the best way to say it. Theoldhollywood.com, look up the mentor program, and if it's right for you, I work with very experienced people, and I work with people who've never done anything before. So it just really depends on whether or not we can connect on what your intention is.
So about intention, because creative people typically have very big, inspired ideas and lofty goals and amazing intentions. But how do you break that down and really kind of see, well, maybe your awesome idea is better suited for a book, or better suited for a YouTube series, or better suited for anything but the big screen, which ultimately is the goal for almost every filmmaker. They want to see their movie on the big screen.
Well, it's a great question, and there's quite a learning curve. Filmed entertainment for many, many years, the curve has happened extraordinarily. I mean, it's a very, very different place today. And because of that, it's very important for me to be really frank with people. I never try to discourage people. But it's, if you really want to get this done, is this something you really want to get done, or do you want to just have the fun of trying? Because if you want to have the fun of trying, that's fine too. But if you want to get it done, you have to get rid of your preconceived notions. It's not that movies don't get made today, they do, but it is a completely different world. The studios are not run basically by creative people at all now. They're run by business people. The whole idea of taking chances and risks and doing original programming, I know with my friends, one of the biggest complaints is you try to go to a theater and it's part 6 of this series, part 8 of that series, or they took an old television movie and they try to update it into making it a new movie. It's very difficult to get original, clever, daring programs made in theaters because of the fact that it's so expensive to make a movie nowadays. It's very difficult to get theater space when you're looking for it. And because you're competing with the Tom Cruises of the world, it's very difficult to do that. And if you set yourself up to say, this is the only thing that will make me feel fulfilled, you're kind of asking for trouble. So one of the things that I ask of people when they make application for the program is, are you willing to take constructive criticism? Can you really hear that? Which is very difficult for some people. And I must say that the people I've been working with have been wonderful about that. Not that we don't get into arguments. You know, there's a great, very quickly, there's a great story that I actually talk about on the website that I'll mention briefly now. When I started my career, I was working for a producer named Ray Stark. And Ray made, I think, like 8 or 9 movies with the playwright Neil Simon, who in the 70s and in the 80s was the king. You know, he had every play he did was a huge hit. He had a clause in his contract that you could not change a word of his script. I think he may be the only screenwriter that ever got that in Hollywood because of his fame. But what was extraordinary about Neil is I remember sitting in a room with him at a reading for a movie we were about to do that he wrote, not important which it was. And he got all the cast in a room and he said, okay, guys, just read the script. And my boss, Neil, had me sit next to, my boss, Ray, had me sit next to Neil and said, watch what Neil does. So he would sit there and, you know, the actors would, you know, read the lines and I would see Neil making notes in his script. This works. This is awful, terrible, cross out, bad, not funny. It was extraordinary. At the end, he said to everybody, thank you very much. I realize I have to rewrite at least a half of this. I'll do that rewrite soon. And I was like, Neil, how do you do that? And he said, number one, Stephen, if people don't laugh, it's not funny. I don't care if I think it's funny or you think it's funny. If they don't laugh, it's not funny. I got to change it. And then the other thing is when I do a rewrite on my material, I pretend to myself that I have been hired to rewrite the work of somebody I don't like. And if you know, a lot of us people who are Jewish in the film industry.
That's the hardest part of any creative process, is being able to step away and reconstruct what you have created, and having somebody else come in gives you an entirely different perspective on it. And you have given me a lot of advice and pearls over the years. And a lot of them, especially when I was in the midst of my personal turmoil, was about letting go of control. And you once said to me, when you live a structured life, it's hard to go through things that you have absolutely no control over. And I feel like the element of control in a creative process, that's part of like the training and the coaching that you do, so people can put the control aside to let the creativity really come to life.
It is, because filmmaking is an incredibly collaborative process.
Yeah.
It's a very collaborative process. And you have to be willing to take ideas from other people and understand that that might be better than the original idea that you had. You need to be really open to those type of things, because there's constant changing that's going on. And you're right, control, which I think most of us know, the more controlling we are, the more we're coming from fear and not trusting the process as much. It's a very difficult thing. And if you look at the history of the film industry, and you see most, not all, but you see most filmmakers who have a certain amount of success, and then they don't have anybody telling them, hey, did you think of this? This doesn't work. All of a sudden, they'll come out with a movie and you'll say, my God, that's awful. How did that happen? It's because one person thought that they knew everything and weren't taking advice from other people. So yeah, that's a very important part of the collaborative process.
Yeah, and for me, there's nothing like experiencing a movie in the theater packed with people and popcorn and having that experience. And most of my people on MomTime events know that I create a series of MomTime movie events to create like premiere parties around films that I think that my group of women and moms and families will really enjoy. Like for me, Bad Moms is a spiritual experience.
Hey, listen, it was one of my favorite movies of last year.
It was the best. But
and maybe one of the funniest movies I've seen in many, many, many years. So I'm with you about that.
It's so good. But for anyone who doesn't understand just how much it takes to make a film, just look at the credits of any film and the hundreds of people who are listed in the credits. And as a producer and director who's really in charge of bringing all those people together and managing and creating, you know, tiered economy that are at work, being able to collaborate and being part of that process, it's a miracle that any one film ever gets completed and distributed.
Oh, anytime a movie gets made, it is a complete miracle, unless it is a gigantic best-selling book, 50 Shades of Grey, perfect example, or unless you have Tom Cruise as your lead. Perfect.
I don't think Tom Cruise has the same level of cachet as he once did. But well, I hear what you're saying.
He does outside the United States, because most movies today get most of their income outside the United States, which is another big issue that's going on with filmmaking. And Tom is a gigantic star all over the world, known regardless of what his movies do here. And they usually do well. They do phenomenally well around the rest of the world. And, look, we can move on to other things, but the technology always changes. When you and I first started working together, DVDs were the thing. Blockbuster was still big. You had to go. They wouldn't deliver to you. Yes, that's the very first volume of the Spiritual Cinema Circle. Very, very first volume. So yeah, I mean, everything has changed, and it's really been extraordinary.
But do you think the ultimate core of filmmaking and sharing stories, and filmmaking is really about storytelling? Do you think the fundamental of that is still intact?
Nothing that has changed about drama. It's just the venue. It's your distribution outlet. It's just that. Watch some of the series and some of the original movies that Netflix does. There are two series on there now, one called Gypsy with Naomi Watts, and another one called Ozark with Jason Bateman and Laura Linney. I think they're 10-hour series, and they are fabulously written, intricate, adult stories that are about characters and dilemmas and things like that. They're extraordinary. It's just a different delivery medium. A completely different delivery medium. And if you accept that and you embrace that, you actually have a better chance today to get your project done. As long as you're not saying, I've got to go to the Chinese theater in Hollywood and get a big premiere and get my hands put in the cement. The only way your hands are going to get put in the cement is if you buy one of those blocks. You know, it's just not going to happen. But boy, you can get your movie out in a whole bunch of different ways if you're not tied to that old genre, that old paradigm.
I think it's amazing, and there's so many creative people in this world, and there's so many more people who are tapping into their spirituality and their spiritual practices. You know, yoga was the first thing that really brought spiritual ideas into the mainstream, at least in the last 20 years or so. And now it's becoming much more part of people's regular everyday practice and vernacular. So there's so much more room. And I've always said that, and one of the things that just personally drove me to want to go into entertainment was the fact that there's nothing more powerful or transformative as way, as a medium goes than entertainment. You're just able to transmit messages in such a powerful way to masses of people. And I don't think that's ever going to really change or die down. Now people just, I could see you. I could see you.
I had a motion with my gardener not to use the leaf blower because we're never going to be able to hear each other. That's the one thing about doing these type of things. I can't quite leave. So this doesn't mean I'm going to kill anybody. This means, hey, don't use the leaf blower. What can you do, right? Oh, okay, he got it.
I love it.
Yeah, baby.
And then you
Facebook Live.
Room for impromptu moments that just naturally happen and are awesome. Okay, so in kind of bringing this all together again, and why I really wanted to introduce you to the MomTime community and just to my world, and you know, we've done this kind of thing before on a different platform with my Mama's Pearls radio show, but just to also showcase to people how important it is to find mentors and to find people who you connect with on such a deep level, both personally as well as having professional alignment. And again, you totally align me with spirituality and entertainment. And for a while, I was like the niche lawyer in spiritual entertainment. And it's just, when you find those markers, people should just pursue them. You know, if it feels right to you, pursue it. And search out for the mentors, search out for the coaches. Stephen is running a coaching and consultation program specifically for filmmakers. So if you do know anybody who is working on a project and wants that leadership and guidance throughout it and hand-holding, connect with Stephen. He'll go over his rates. I'm a proud affiliate of his program. And again, just bringing it back to, and one thing we actually didn't talk about in the beginning, which I did want to say, like, this is in your blood. You were literally born into this industry and grew up with Ronald Reagan and Frank Sinatra and the real old Hollywood. And for me, this is like a total flashback and coming full circle. You know, we are stepping somewhere in time, just connecting in this way, in this medium. And can you talk a little bit more about your experiences growing up and, you know, some of your very fun movie making stories?
Well, I think if you will talk to my wife, who you know very well, she'll say Stephen hasn't quite decided what he's going to do still until when he grows up, because he hasn't quite done that yet. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But as I was getting older, yeah, I was born into a Hollywood family. My dad, Sylvan Simon, was a producer and a director, made a lot of movies with Abbott and Costello, and Red Skelton was his best friend. He made movies with the Marx Brothers and Milton Berle and all those comedians. He was working on From Here to Eternity when he had an untimely death due to a brain hemorrhage. Frank Sinatra, for a lot of reasons, which I talk about in my book, became my godfather, my unofficial godfather. He appointed himself my godfather. I was very lucky about that. And I had a fascinating teenage years in my 20s with being in places with him and just being able to be around him. When my dad died, my mother remarried another film producer, and I was around the industry my whole life, and I knew eventually that that is what I was going to do. I kind of went off into politics. I actually got a law degree and didn't practice law for a very long time. And Cynthia will definitely attest to the fact that I don't remember too much of my legal background. And I begged my way into a job with Ray Stark, who had produced Funny Girl and Funny Lady and The Way We Were. And he gave me my first job in the industry. And the very first thing I ever did was call the agent for Richard Matheson, because I had read this book called Bid Time Return that I was absolutely in love with. And I met the author, Richard Matheson, and I said, give me 2 or 3 years to learn what I'm doing here, and I promise you we'll get your movie made. And we did. Bid Time Return became Somewhere in Time. And Richard also wrote the book that What Dreams May Come was based on. And those are the movies that I've always loved. You know, what I call spiritual to me is inspiring. It is not necessarily religious. It can be, but it isn't necessarily religious. It's inspiring. You know, the projects that I'm working on now with clients are not overtly spiritual projects in any way. You know, what happened in New York with the police department and with terrorism starting in the 80s and coming up to today, that isn't what you would call necessarily a spiritual project. But it is very inspiring and very uplifting. And that is really what I'm looking to do. The only thing that I won't work with clients about are things that are dark and ugly and negative and cynical and brutal. I wanted to do a series of films like the Saw films. I'm not your guy, because I do believe that we want to put things out into the world that are going to be fascinating, but that are not going to add to the fear of all the things that are going on in the world today. With that, again, I just say people should go to it's very easy, theoldhollywood.com, THE, oldhollywood.com, and look at the mentor program. And when you read through all the specifics and I think the endorsements of my clients, you'll have a sense whether it's right for you or not. And if it is, there's a way for you to get in touch with me on that.
And what can we expect from the Spiritual Cinema Circle? What's coming up?
Well, you know what's fascinating is that we are in our 14th year at the Spiritual Cinema Circle. And that to me is just amazing. I think if any of us had said when we started this, when we launched in the spring of 2004, that we would start our 14th year in 2017, I'm not sure any of us would have believed it. I mean, we've distributed about 650 films, I think, to the people who have been with us from the beginning. And we still have a lot of people who've been with us since day one. And the thing about the Spiritual Cinema Circle is that you get to keep the movies. You know, this is not like it used to be at Netflix and things like that. You get a DVD, you send it back. You get a DVD every month. There's 3 shorts and a feature on it. I do a lot of discussions, and you get to keep them. And what's wonderful for me is that people are constantly getting in touch with me saying, hey, remember that movie that you had in 2009 or 2013 about this or about that? I had a friend going through something like that, so I pulled it out and we watched it together, and it was the perfect moment. And it's just been so much fun for me to be able to share that with people who are interested in the circle, and that's spiritualcinemacircle.com. Spiritualcinemacircle.com. You can get all the information there. And the first month is always free.
I remember we launched it on April Fool's Day, which is always kind of stuck. And, you know, it's so funny looking back on that now for me, because I was with it for, you know, got it launched, helped, you know, build a foundation, get it launched, and coming again from New Line Cinema going into the Spiritual Cinema Circle. It was such a different. New Line Cinema had a department for business and legal, and then stepping in to be the business and legal department of the Spiritual Cinema Circle. And so my late 20s, early 30s, and just how right it was for all of us, and like the synergy of the circle, how we really came together, and just how when you're really passionate about what you're doing, it didn't feel like work, even though we were working like 24/7 to get it launched and to get it going. And it just hit all the right points for all of us, you know, we just all brought our real strengths. And there was nothing as magical, you know, as part of that process. But you saying how you always feel, or you know, Lauren noticing that you still feel like what are you going to be when you grow up? I think that's part of just being an entrepreneur and always wanting more and doing the next project. And every project you really are starting from scratch. And when you're a filmmaker and a producer, that is, even if you're doing the 5th movie in the Saw series, it's still a brand new movie that you have to treat like a brand new entrepreneurial project.
That is one of the hardest things about being a producer in the film industry. When I was about to produce Somewhere in Time, which was my first film as an individual producer, I was on the Universal lot, and I ran into Michael Douglas. And I'd known Michael since I was a kid. We grew up in Beverly Hills together. And I told Michael what I was doing, and he said, okay, you and I are going to have lunch because I got to tell you something. And I'm going to make this story as short as possible. He produced a film called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was a huge critical success. And it was nominated for a whole bunch of Academy Awards. And he said, Stephen, I thought we'd go that night, and I thought we'd win one, maybe 2. They, including Best Picture, and all these things. And Michael said, I'm really smart. I know what I'm going to do, because he had another project that he wanted to sell as a producer afterwards. So he set up a whole series of meetings at all the studios for the day after the Oscar telecast, thinking he would have won 1 or 2 awards. Well, he won all the major awards. And he said, Stephen, I went and pitched that to, I think, 7 different places the next day and got turned down at all 7. And we had just won the Academy Award the night before. So he said, it's a very important thing for you to know. As a producer, you start fresh every single time. Doesn't matter what your last picture did. You start new. It's like building, like you're gonna create an automobile. Well, you know, you get an assembly line, and you know it's a lot to do it in the beginning, but then the cars crank out. When you're doing a movie, you're setting up a new assembly line for a new car with completely new parts every single time, and it's fun. Yeah. But it's also, you know, you have to be willing, and I know this is something that a lot of people have a difficult with. You have to be willing to accept failure. And I know that failure is a very loaded word for people. I understand that, particularly in the world we live in today. Well, nothing's ever really a failure. I disagree with that. I've had failures. I've made movies, which we're not going to talk about because I'm not terribly proud of them, that turned out to just not be good movies. They just weren't. They were failures at what they wanted to be and what they tried to do. I've had all the things like that in my life. You learn from failure. I think that's a very important thing. It's a great teacher. But you do fail, even if it turns into something wonderful later. And that's a thing that you've got to be willing to do. You know, you're not going to get every script you write that's not going to get made. It just isn't. Yes. And as long as you have it in your gut that this is what you have to do and you can't survive without it, you will eventually get your chance.
So you can never rest on your laurels.
No.
Or your Oscars.
No.
Or your box office successes, and you can never stay too down with your failures. So what was something personal that you learned from your failures about, you know, I mean, I see you as a very resilient person, and I've been through a lot of ups and downs with you throughout, you know, our time that we've known each other. And, you know, as old Hollywood as you are, and I always think, you know, a lot of people in Hollywood have to have a very thick skin, and you happen to be one of the most sensitive people that I know. And I'm also a very sensitive, empathic person. So how have you had to shield yourself, and what are some of the real things that you've learned about yourself in building the resiliency and facing the truths about, you know, some of the ups and downs?
Boy, it's a really great question. And I'm not sure I've ever really tried to put that into words. So thank you. That's a really fascinating and challenging question. I think mostly what I learned from myself when I go through those things is how much I love what I do, because you have to love what you do to spend 2 or 3 years working on something.
Maybe it's a little crazy to do film.
It does help. Yeah. That is, by the way, it you don't have to be crazy to be in the film industry, but it does help. It helps a lot if you are. You know, you can work 2 or 3 years on a project and it never sees the light of day. And you kind of have to move on from that. I mean, it took me 20 years to get What Dreams May Come made. I had probably 100 rejections in the 17 or 18 years that led up to it actually finally happening. And you learn that you just can't give up. I think that's the most important.
At what point do you have to let go and move on? I mean, I get timing. Timing's always an interesting thing. So I'll have great ideas for events to do in town and venues and people I want to work with. And, you know, that's what I mainly do through MomTime events. And sometimes, you know, I'll get the hit and I'll be like, okay, I got to table it because right now is not the right time. And then it'll come together. When I did my Indian goddess night at the Sands Point Preserve at the castle, which was awesome and a very spiritual experience. I knew I wanted to do something there since I moved here 10 years ago, and it took me 10 years to finally get the okay and to put that together. So there's some things that I know I need to move on right now. And for me, it's just more of like an intuitive hit, and then the people show up and things just fall into place. But how do you know which projects to shepherd when?
You don't. You just don't. You know, it's a guessing game. And, you know, you just have to go from your gut. Yeah. You know, there's a wonderful saying that you don't want to tell anybody a joke that you don't think is funny. It's hard enough to get people to laugh if you do think a joke is funny. If you have a project that you love, it is very difficult to come to that moment where you say, well, never. You know, as we sit here today, for years ago, developed a movie called Goodnight, Mrs. Calabash, which is the real story of Jimmy Durante, who almost nobody under 50 today has ever heard of. Jimmy Durante and an incredible love affair that he had with a woman whom he referred to as Mrs. Calabash, which everybody thought was a myth. And it's a great old Hollywood love story. And I've been turned down by every single imaginable entity, and we've tried to get actors and stuff like that. And now it's in my drawer because I just came up against a wall. But I'm not going to say that that's gone forever, because at some point, and this is the wonderful thing about the film industry, somebody could say to somebody else, oh, this actor could say, oh man, I've always loved Jimmy Durante. I wonder if somebody's got a movie on Jimmy Durante. And then somebody hears that and says, wait a minute, didn't Steven have a movie? And then all of a sudden you have your movie made. So I'm not so sure you give up most of the time. You just are willing to defer and put it in their drawer until maybe another day. Yeah.
And I that's one of the trickiest things, you know, timing really is everything. But do you think, and one of the things that I remember actually from your courses and lectures and a lot of your telecalls was doing the pitch and breaking everything that you know, your 400-page book and your projects down into, you know, a 2-minute pitch. And do you think it's the pages or the people or the words that really, you know, sell a story?
You know, things have changed a lot. Pitches today are rare. Most things don't get developed on the basis of a pitch unless you have a very extensive track record as a success. Because just having a good idea, hey, this is a great idea, doesn't really mean anything, particularly if you're doing something that's television that you want to be long form. People want to know, well, yeah, but what is episode 8 in season 4 going to look like? Do you have a vision for that? And then a whole lot of movies were developed on the basis of pitches. because there were some terrific people. There's a guy named David Permut, P-E-R-M-U-T. It's an old friend of mine. I haven't heard from him in years, who is the best person at pitching I've ever seen in my entire life. I've never known anybody to pitch a project as well as David. And there was a stretch of time in the 80s when I think he had 30, 40 different projects being developed at different studios, but they didn't come to fruition because there was no follow through. I mean, the pitch was one thing, and that wasn't David's fault. It was just he didn't have the writers that didn't have didn't really know where they were going with those things. So pitching today is a much different ballgame than it was before, and now you really have to have much more than a pitch. This is what I was talking about. The client that I'm working with now on this 8-hour series, he did 3 complete episodes, which are it's about 180 pages of script, and a detailed 20-page outline on the other 5 episodes. You need at least that today if you're going to do something as major as what he's looking to do.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, and the entertainment field is not going to get any less competitive, and there's so much content that's still out there. Everything is basically saturated in content.
Everything's changed to that extent, and you're right about, you can do your own film, put it on YouTube. The problem is getting exposure. If you put it there, it doesn't necessarily mean anybody's going to see it. And that becomes a whole marketing issue, which is a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other MomTime Muse. Yes. Okay, so I want to wrap up and just do a quick recap. Again, just kind of, I see a lot of this conversation really just aligning with a lot of undertones in entrepreneurship in general, and the common themes about working in a collaborative space and with other people to kind of build your assembly line for whatever projects or products you're looking to put out there. And I wanted to wrap up with something fun. Again, you can find Stephen at theoldhollywood.com. You can also link to him and send him a message through Facebook if you're interested in learning more about him, his program, the Spiritual Cinema Circle, or if you want some inside background to me. Just saying. So, okay, so something fun. So these are my Come Tell Mama questions that I've carried over from my Mama's Pearls radio show. So Stephen, what is your luxury indulgence?
A luxury indulgence.
Mm-hmm. And I ask this because, Mom Time is really meant to give moms, but everyone, a moment of mom time. And I really feel it's important to everybody's rejuvenation and sanity to have your moments. So, how do you indulge?
For me, I can tell you what it is for me. For me, it's a date day every week with my wife.
It's cute.
Yeah, so we both really want to do, and it's really fun. And a lot of times it involves going to our favorite restaurant down in wine country here in the Willamette Valley in Oregon and going wine tasting and all of these great wineries that we have here. I would say that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
That's awesome. Okay, so if you had to pick just one, which would it be? The best meal of your life, the best sex of your life, or the best sleep of your life? So I want to know where the priorities are.
I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to answer for both of us. The best meal. I know that's the case about you. So for me too.
Okay. So this one, I'm actually
maybe the longest period of time I've ever seen you go without eating something.
I mean, I have my coffee. Oh crap! I have my coffee, my smoothie, and my water.
Okay.
But it is all liquid, and it is lunchtime. So yeah, that's happening right after this. Okay, so this I'm actually very curious about you. What is your favorite movie genre?
Favorite movie genre? It would be spiritual cinema, what some people might call fantasy. Okay. Wouldn't it be wonderful if It's a Wonderful Life, Lost Horizons, those kinds of films. Certainly those are the things that inspired me and why I got into the business to make Somewhere in Time and What Dreams May Come.
Is that your favorite movie, or would you say your favorite movie? It's a Wonderful
Oh,
Life.
boy, it's really hard to say favorite movie. It's really hard to say favorite movie.
What's the favorite movie that you've done?
If I had to say one, it would be Somewhere in Time.
Yeah.
Because that was my first film as a producer. It was so magical. We went through so many trials and tribulations in getting the film made. And then it came out and it bombed at the box office. It bombed with the critics. It broke all of our hearts. I actually went into my house and didn't come out for 6 weeks and grew my beard in 1980, and I've never shaved it since. It was a devastating moment. But then over the years, it found its audience. And today it is really a beloved film, which is known as a cult film, which I'm very happy about. So, and there's a weekend every October at the Grand Hotel where we shot Somewhere in Time, totally devoted to the film, as Somewhere in Time weekend at the Grand Hotel. So I would say Somewhere in Time is definitely, if I had to pick one, it would be that one.
It's an incredible film, but don't you feel that there's no patience in Hollywood?
Oh.
Or in general, like things need time to roll out and find their audience, you know? And I feel with pretty much everything from movies to books, from any form of entertainment to even product and clubs and any topic, there is an audience out there, but finding it may take time.
Well, it's also a very different world today. I mean, and to be fair to the movie industry, when the movie industry was at its height, which is generally considered to be 1939 and 1940, that is considered to be like the height of the golden age of Hollywood. There was nothing other than movies if you wanted filmed entertainment. Television didn't exist. Needless to say, the internet didn't exist. You know,
right.
You didn't have any competition if you wanted to have filmed entertainment. Today, just what we're working on here on our computers, on iPhones, and things like that, there's so much competition, and people's attention spans are very short. You know, if you don't get them in the first 40 seconds, 50 seconds, minute or something, you may lose them. So it's a different world today.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so food. Are you a sweet or salty person?
Salty. I can't anymore. Not good for me, and I don't. But if I had my druthers and I could have 2 whole bags of potato chips and onion dip, I'd be a very happy guy.
Well, that's the best.
I don't do it anymore. I can't do that anymore. But I think about it from time to time.
But I mean, you could do it with like yogurt dip, but it's not the same. All right. So what do you consider your most beautiful feature?
Say again?
What do you consider to be your most beautiful feature?
My wife. I know that sounds corny, but
yeah, but that's not you. You. What about you? What do you think she likes most about you?
Well, it's certainly not the way I dance, and it's certainly not the way I sing. It's certainly not my sense of humor. Boy, that's a hard thing to say. I would say compassion.
I would say that's right on. For me, it's my voice, obviously. It's my singing voice.
My family says I cry at card tricks, and I think that's true. I do. So I think if Lauren was asked that question, she would say that.
Compassion. I agree. And what is the best advice that your mama, who I know is quite a character, ever gave you?
Best advice my mother ever gave me?
Yeah.
This too shall pass.
Indeed. Indeed. That's awesome. Prayers to the mama. Thank you so much.
I do have to say, however, that after a while in my life, you know, I kind of compare that to having a kidney stone, which is true. Everything does eventually pass, but sometimes it's really painful.
It's very true. I've had moments like that. Well, thank you so much.
Yes, also that it's important when I say that, and I'm talking about, again, about creative people, is that to embrace your emotion, you have to have access to your heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important. Why do people watch the same movie over and over again? And people who love movies, if you have a film that you love, why do people do that? They do that because they want to spend time with the characters in that film again. There was something about those characters, those people, their relationship with each other or whatever they're doing, where you want to spend time with them. You know, the Jimmy Stewart character in It's a Wonderful Life is a really great example. People don't want to see the same big special effects movie 23 times. Because once you've seen it, basically you've seen it. The movies that I think you go back to are the movies that touched you, that moved you, and that you want to spend time with those people again because you relate to them, either to the actors or to the characters. And it's so important. You have to have access to your heart.
Yeah, I think that's very true and very beautiful. And when something really touches you, or if you need a good cry, I have a staple of movies that I turn to, and you know, it takes you on a journey and an experience. And there's really no medium that is as transformative or amazing as film.
You know, I
really agree.
There's a movie many years ago called Bandits with Billy Bob Thornton and Kate Blanchett and Bruce Willis. And there's a great line in it that I've always remembered, which is, the heart is a mysterious organ. It plays by its own rules. And I think those of us who are emotional people recognize that. You know, you can tell yourself who to love, but your heart isn't necessarily going to listen to you. Your heart and your brain may work together in your body as different organs, and they're interconnected. But boy, when it comes to creativity, I'm not sure that there's a lot of connection between your brain and your heart, because things that you think and things that you feel are completely different things. And for me, I've always trusted, regardless of where it's led me, my feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a water sign, first of all, so you're going to be led by your feelings, as am I, but I think that translates not just through creativity, but throughout every industry. I mean, even now there's a movement in the financial industry for people to get out of their heads, or at least use their heads to match up to where the heart is, in, you know, putting your money in investing in more sustainable, eco-friendly, you know, more heart-based businesses. So, and I think when entrepreneurs and people are trying to do projects, you have to have that heart and mind connection, because for me, it doesn't make sense to throw my heart and my resources and my time and energy behind a project or event or a client or anything if I don't really feel that connection to it. It's, for me, when I've tried in the past to force something like that, or to just do it because I needed the money or something like that, like, it just puts me in such a low energy, and I can't show up and do my best work, you know? And then there's this forcing. Every time I would try and, you know, do work for it, just nothing would happen. So I've learned to, you know, to really do that practice and stay in alignment with what I choose to put my time and my energy behind, forces behind a project or a person or a client or company that I'm working with in consulting, to make sure that there is that heart and mind connection. And I think especially in the creative process, you and filmmaking, you cannot have one without the other.
Yeah, and you have to really, at the end of the day, and I think it's a great way to wrap everything up about all of this, is you have to love what you do. You know, George Burns always, and I think George made it to his 100th birthday. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he did. I think he made it to 100 or 101. But he got close if he didn't. He got to 99, I know that. And he was asked what the secret to a long life is, and he always said the same 4 words: love what you do. Mm-hmm. And if there's a part of you that has always wanted to do something creative, at some point or another, it's really important to at least give yourself the shot to do it, so that you don't look back and say, God, I wish I'd tried that. I have to say that I've made a lot of really dumb mistakes in my life. I've done a lot of things that I look back on and say, oh my goodness. We won't get into what the details. The problem with talking to you is that you know what too many of them are.
I know.
Okay? So that isn't fair. But the things I think you regret the most are the things that you didn't do. Mm-hmm. I think it's a lot easier to look back and say, whew, boy, man, that was dumb. At least you can know the outcome. If you really want to do something and you don't do it because you're afraid to do it, I think those are the things that haunt you forever, which is what would have happened if, what would have happened if, there are things that happen in life. You need to be in the right, but you also have to be willing to act. You have to be willing to see somebody across a room that you're attracted to and say, okay, if I don't do something, that person's going to be probably gone forever. So I better do it. And if I get rejected, I get rejected. Mm-hmm. I think those are the people who are not afraid of rejection, can deal with it, can understand it, and have a burning creative desire inside of them to do something. Those are the people who get the most out of the creative projects that they manifest.
And turning the idea into action and actually manifesting an idea is what differentiates the people who have ideas and the people who are successful and make things happen.
Yeah. So I can tell you that in any time, Somewhere in Time is a movie that a lot of people love and a lot of people think is really one of the most boring, melodramatic, dull, old-fashioned. I mean, I can't tell you all the negative comments that the critics gave it and stuff like that. The fact that it survived and was resurrected and now has this incredible following and this weekend every year. And I get messages on Facebook or somebody sends me an email and tells me how much they love Summer in Time. And I remember all the things that all of us, because it was an incredibly collaborative process, all the things that we all did to make that work. It is incredibly satisfying. And that movie came out in 1980. This is 37 years later. And I am incredibly gratified by the people who love Summer in Time. And it's a wonderful feeling to create a project like that people go back to years later and still enjoy. It's an amazing feeling. Some of the failures that I've had.
Film makes time immortal. It makes time stand still. It freezes that moment. You can repeat it and download it and have it at your fingertips all the time. And it's something that's just remarkable about film and technology, that we're able to capture those moments and basically freeze frame it forever.
I think as we wrap this up, I think it's very important too, because you have now been going on for an hour.
Yeah.
And you haven't mentioned the one film that...
Oh, my favorite!
the film that gave you your nickname for me. And I think it's a good thing to go out on.
I do too, because it's what really solidified my connection towards you. Not the Somewhere in Time. I mean, What Dreams May Come is pretty and all, but Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Party on, dude.
For me, set the tone of our relationship. And you will forever be my beloved Royal Ugly Dude.
I get, hey, dear R-U-D, okay? We'll look at this. Hey, R-U-D. And it's always been wonderful for my confidence. So thank you, Cyn.
You're welcome. And then in the footer of the email, I'm always like, this communication is protected by the attorney-client privilege. So just to give everybody
great.
Real insight into our relationship. So I am so grateful for you and our almost 2 decades of being in each other's lives, and really you are my second dad and godfather to Colby, and just such an important part of my life on a personal level. business-wise, you've truly helped me develop and, you know, find myself in the genre of entertainment. And I just couldn't have done any of that crap without you. And I'm so grateful for the ups and downs and how we've learned together and have been resilient together and have picked each other up and have boosted each other. And you are just a remarkable person, and I love you so much. So
thank you, Cynthia. I love you so much too. To you and to Craig and to the kids and to everybody. You're an amazing woman. You've been extraordinary for me in my life, and you're a great friend. You're a great collaborator. You're a great lawyer, and you are one of the people that I listen to when you say, "Hey, dumbbell, no, don't do that." It's like, okay, I hear you. Anyway, thank you so much, Cyn. Sending you much love.
Love you, Stephen.
And thanks to everybody else that listened.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and enjoy your Friday and your weekends. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.